The winter trip had been on her mind for months. She kept telling herself that she needed a break, just a little time away in a place where everything felt calm and untouched. That was why she chose a quiet ski resort far from the city. She wasn't the kind of person who chased wild adventures or tried dangerous sports. She simply wanted peace, snow-covered views, warm tea, and long, slow walks where her thoughts could settle like falling snowflakes. When she reached the resort, the first breath of cold air felt different. It was crisp, almost sharp, but refreshing. The mountains looked breathtaking, their white peaks stretching into the sky like frozen waves. The lobby smelled of pine and cinnamon. Guests were laughing, children were excited, and the crackling fireplace added a cozy glow to everything around her. She felt happy just being there. She had lived a long life, raised a family, and worked hard, so this small break felt well earned. She didn't try skiing the first day. Instead, she explored the resort grounds with slow steps, taking in the beauty around her. She had always enjoyed simple things more than loud activities. She liked watching snow settle on tree branches, listening to the wind, and feeling the crunch of ice beneath her boots. The resort had a little wooden path that led through a forest area behind the lodges. It wasn't a dangerous trail, just a small walkway used by people who liked peaceful strolls. The next morning, she woke up unusually early. The world outside her window was still dim. Soft shades of blue stretched across the sky, and the sun had not yet climbed over the mountains. She wrapped herself in her warmest jacket, put on her gloves, and stepped outside. The air was colder than the day before, but she didn't mind. The cold made her feel awake, like her senses were sharper. She walked along the quiet path with slow, steady steps. Hardly anyone else was awake at that hour, so the only sounds were her own footsteps and the gentle brushing of the trees as the wind moved through them. She felt peaceful inside. It reminded her of earlier years when she used to take morning walks before her day got busy. Now that she was older, she treasured moments like this even more. As she reached a spot where the path curved slightly uphill, she paused for a moment to catch her breath. While standing still, she heard a faint sound so soft that she thought she imagined it at first. It wasn't a regular noise like wind or birds. It was something different. Something like a tiny cry mixed with a faint crackling echo. She frowned slightly and tilted her head, listening again. There it was, another sound, even softer. It reminded her of a small animal trying to call out, but too weak to do so properly. Her heart instinctively responded with concern. She had always been gentle toward animals, and even though she knew the mountains had wildlife, she also knew some creatures struggled during winters. Maybe an injured fox? Or a baby bird fallen from a tree? She couldn't just walk past without checking. She stepped off the main wooden path onto the snow-covered ground. Her feet sank slightly, leaving small prints behind her. She followed the direction of the noise, walking carefully between the tall pine trees. The sound got a little clearer, though still very faint, like whoever or whatever was making it was exhausted. A few steps later, she reached a small dip in the snow. At first, she didn't see anything. But then something shifted slightly, and her eyes caught movement, a tiny shiver under a thin layer of snow. She gasped softly and moved closer, crouching down slowly. She brushed away the snow with her gloved hands, revealing something she had never seen before. It wasn't shaped like any mountain animal she recognized. It was small, curled tightly like it was trying to protect itself from the cold. Its skin, or what she thought was skin, looked smooth, but slightly textured, almost like scales. They flickered faintly with tiny patterns of color, which she assumed were reflections from the early morning light hitting the snow. Its wings, if those were wings, were folded in, one of them looking stiff and partially frozen. It was breathing shallowly, and each breath made a soft, trembling sound. It looked scared but too weak to move away from her. For a moment, she simply stared, not out of fear but confusion. The little creature didn't look dangerous. In fact, it looked helpless, almost like it had been left out in the cold for too long. She had always believed that every living thing deserved kindness. And this creature, whatever it was, clearly needed help. She softened her voice and spoke gently, the same tone she used with frightened animals before. "It's okay. Don't be scared. I'm not going to hurt you." To her surprise, the creature's trembling slowed. Its eyes, large and somewhat shiny, opened just a bit. It looked at her with a strange mixture of fear and trust. There was something intelligent in those eyes, though she didn't realize it yet. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a long, warm scarf she usually wrapped around her neck during colder walks. She hesitated for a second, wondering if touching the creature might hurt it. But she reminded herself that cold could be far more dangerous. So she slowly slid the scarf underneath it, lifting it gently. She was surprised by the warmth coming from its body. It didn't match the cold weather at all. It felt like holding a living ember, warm enough to melt ice if held long enough. She assumed the creature must have had a fever. That explained the glow-like flickers on its scales. She didn't understand the truth. This wasn't sickness. It was part of its natural biology. She wrapped it securely, making sure its wings were tucked comfortably. It closed its eyes, as if relieved to finally feel some warmth. She could feel its heartbeat fast and unsteady, but still strong enough to give hope. She wondered if the resort staff might know what kind of creature this was. Maybe a tourist had brought it from somewhere far away, and it got lost in the snow. She couldn't imagine any other explanation, because the idea of it being something not from Earth didn't cross her mind at all. She glanced around, expecting maybe someone else had heard the cry or saw her kneeling there. But the forest was empty, still, and silent. The sky was beginning to lighten, and a few golden rays were starting to filter through the treetops. The creature shifted slightly in her arms, making a small crackling noise again. Not painful, just unusual. She tightened her hold gently and whispered, "Don't worry. I'll help you. You're safe now." As she made her way back toward the walkway, she walked slower than before, careful not to jostle the fragile little being. She held it close to her chest to protect it from the wind. Even then, she noticed something. Its warmth was growing stronger, almost comforting. Instead of feeling heavy or burdensome, the creature felt like a small, living flame she needed to shelter. When she reached the resort lobby, the place was still quiet. Only one staff member was setting up breakfast, but no one looked closely at what she was holding. The creature stayed completely still, hidden quietly inside her scarf. She moved past the lobby and into the hallway leading to her room, grateful that no one asked her about it. Inside her room, she closed the door gently and placed the creature on the bed. It blinked, adjusting to the warm indoor air. She quickly grabbed extra towels, arranging them into a soft nest. She added a heating pad underneath and covered everything with another layer of cloth so the warmth would spread evenly. She wasn't sure if she was doing everything correctly, but she did her best. The creature seemed to understand her intention, because it slowly shifted into the little nest, curling up comfortably. Its breathing stabilized slightly, and the faint flickers on its body glowed a little brighter. She watched it for a long moment, unsure of what she had stumbled upon, but certain of one thing: this small creature needed her, and she wouldn't abandon it. She didn't know that far above the mountains, hidden beyond the sky, something else was searching for the same little creature she had found. But for now, all she knew was that she had brought a helpless being out of the cold and into safety. And that simple act of kindness was about to change her peaceful vacation in ways she could never imagine. When she woke up the next morning, she wasn't sure if everything that happened before sunrise had been a dream. For a moment she lay still, staring at the soft light on the ceiling of her room. The memories of the snowy forest, the strange cry, and the tiny creature in her arms all felt so unreal. Her mind wondered if she had imagined it all, maybe because she was tired or too deep in her thoughts. But then she heard a soft crackling sound from the foot of her bed, followed by a small, warm hum. She slowly sat up, her heart both nervous and curious. There it was, the same little creature, curled inside the towel nest she had made. It wasn't a dream at all. The small body was rising gently with each breath, glowing faintly every time it inhaled. She rubbed her eyes, still shocked that such a thing existed. The creature lifted its head as if sensing she was awake. Its eyes opened again, those same large eyes with a soft shine inside them. They didn't look threatening or wild. Instead, they looked tired, like something that had gone through a difficult night and was relieved to finally find warmth. She scooted a little closer and spoke softly. "Good morning, little one." The creature blinked slowly, almost like it understood her greeting. It moved its injured wing a little, and she could see it was still stiff. The scales on the wing shimmered in an odd way, as if tiny sparks flowed through them. She wondered if it was some kind of exotic pet someone had brought from another country. Maybe it had escaped or fallen out of a carrier bag. That seemed more believable than any of the stranger ideas that flickered in her mind. She reached out her hand slowly, giving the creature time to react. It didn't pull away or make any threatening sound. Instead, it leaned slightly toward her fingers. She lightly brushed the side of its head, surprised again by the warmth. It wasn't just warm like a normal animal. It was warm like a small heating stone, gentle but steady. "You're definitely not from around here," she whispered. Half amused and half-worried, the creature responded with a soft trill, a sound she had never heard before. It wasn't like a bird chirp or a cat purr. It had a musical tone, almost like tiny bells mixed with a quiet fire crackle. She stood up slowly and looked around the room, trying to think of what to do next. She needed to find food for it, but what did it eat? She didn't want to give something that might hurt its stomach. So instead of feeding it immediately, she focused on making sure it stayed warm. She adjusted the towels, tucking them more securely around the nest. The creature settled into the warmth, its body glowing faintly again. As she watched it, she noticed something else. Its glow changed color. When she was far from the bed, it remained a soft orange. But when she came closer, the glow shifted to a gentle gold. She thought it must be reacting to the heat of her body, or maybe to the lighting in the room. She didn't think it could be reacting to her presence emotionally. That idea felt too strange. She walked to the small window near the bed. Outside, the snow was falling lightly. The world looked peaceful and completely calm. Nobody out there knew she had a mysterious little creature in her room. She felt a strange sense of responsibility grow inside her chest. It was the same feeling she used to get when her children were young and needed her care. The same warmth of wanting to protect someone or something fragile. She looked back at the creature, wondering what it had gone through. Had it been lost in the snow for hours? Maybe days? How long had it been scared and alone before she heard its cry? These thoughts made her feel even more determined to help it recover. She put on her coat and scarf and stepped into the hallway quietly. She didn't want anyone to see what she was doing. Not because she felt guilty, but because she didn't want workers at the resort to panic or try to take the creature away from her. She didn't know what kind of rules they had about animals inside the rooms. But she wasn't ready to let the creature out of her care, yet down in the breakfast lounge. She filled a small bowl with warm water, pretending it was for tea. She grabbed a few soft fruits from the buffet, just in case the creature could eat something similar. and headed back to her room as quickly as she could without drawing attention. When she opened the door, the creature lifted its head again. The golden glow returned, stronger this time, like it was happy she came back. She placed the bowl of water beside the nest and gently pushed it toward the creature. It leaned forward, sniffing the steam rising from the warm water. Then it placed its tiny tongue into the bowl and took a small sip. She let out a breath of relief. At least water was safe. She cut one of the fruits into tiny pieces and placed them nearby. The creature sniffed them, but didn't try to eat. She didn't force it. She remembered how stressed, frightened animals could be around new food. Instead, she pushed the bowl of water closer and let it drink as much as it wanted. As she observed its movements, she realized something important: the creature trusted her. It didn't act defensive or nervous when she moved close. It didn't try to hide or escape. It looked at her with an expression that felt strangely familiar, like recognition. She couldn't explain it, but it felt as if the creature understood who she was, what she felt, and how she cared. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching the creature rest again. Its glow became softer, matching the peaceful atmosphere of the room. She wondered if its glowing patterns were connected to its health. When she found it, the flickers were weak, almost fading. Now they looked stable and calm. Maybe it really was recovering. She reached out slowly and touched the uninjured part of its wing. The scales felt surprisingly smooth, almost silky, but there was a warmth beneath them, like the heat from a cup of tea. The creature didn't shy away. It leaned into her touch, letting out another soft trill. "You're such a brave little thing," she said with a gentle smile. The creature's tail curled slightly in a relaxed way, and its glow deepened to a gentle golden shade again. As she sat there, her thoughts drifted to something strange. Why did it feel like the creature was responding to her emotions? When she felt worried, its glow dimmed. When she felt calm, it brightened. When she smiled, the glow even shimmered. She laughed softly at herself. Maybe she was imagining things. It wouldn't be the first time her mind played tricks when she was tired. But she couldn't deny that the creature acted differently around her. More peaceful, more trusting. She told herself not to overthink it. Instead, she focused on caring for it. That was something simple and human, something she knew how to do well. She spent the rest of the morning watching over it, adjusting its nest and talking to it in a soft voice. The creature seemed to listen, reacting with tiny movements or small sounds. It didn't speak, of course, but it communicated in its own way through music-like trills, warm glows, and soft hums. As hours passed, the creature's breathing became steadier. The glow on its scales grew more stable. It no longer looked like the helpless thing she found half buried in the snow. It looked like something healing, slowly recovering strength. She didn't know that each moment she spent with it was building a quiet bond neither of them completely understood yet. A bond that would grow deeper, stronger, and more surprising than anything she ever experienced in her life. For now, all she knew was that she wasn't alone in her room anymore. A tiny creature from somewhere far beyond her imagination lay resting in the warm nest she made, glowing gently every time she whispered to it. And she had no idea how much that small act of kindness would change the rest of her journey. She woke the next morning feeling strangely excited, almost like a child on the first day of a school trip. It had been a long time since she felt that kind of anticipation. Most mornings over the past few years had been predictable. Wake up, make tea, tidy the house, run small errands. Nothing surprising, nothing unexpected. But today felt different because she wasn't waking up alone anymore. There was a tiny life inside her room that somehow depended on her warmth, her voice, and her presence. Before even getting out of bed, she turned her head toward the small nest she had made the day before. The creature was still there, curled quietly in the towels, glowing faintly like a tiny lantern. The light coming from it was more stable today, more gentle. It didn't flicker weakly like before. Instead, it pulsed slowly, in a rhythm that reminded her of a calm heartbeat. She smiled softly. "Good morning," she whispered, as if she didn't want to startle it. The creature uncurled itself slightly and lifted its head. Its large, shining eyes blinked up at her in recognition. The glow around it brightened for a moment, turning a soft gold. She didn't know why, but it made her feel warm inside, almost like the creature was saying it was happy to see her awake. She sat up slowly, stretching her arms, feeling her stiff joints loosen as she moved. Then she walked carefully toward the nest and knelt beside it. When she reached out to touch the creature's head, it leaned into her hand with a gentle trill, a sound that had become familiar over the past day. "You look better today," she said. "Stronger." Its tiny chest expanded as it took a slow breath, and the pulsing glow around its scales matched the rise and fall of its breathing. She had never seen anything like it, but instead of fear, she felt only curiosity and kindness. She placed the warm bowl of water she had prepared earlier beside the nest. The creature sniffed the steam again, then took a few small sips. This time it drank a little more confidently. The sound it made afterward, soft crackles, almost like sparks from a fireplace, seemed lighter than before. Less strained dot, since it still refused the fruit. She didn't push it. Maybe it needed more time before eating solid food. She had no idea what its natural diet was, but she didn't want to give it anything unsafe. For now, water and warmth felt enough. As she adjusted the towels around the nest, she noticed something subtle but strange. The patterns on the creature's scales weren't random. They seemed to shift based on what she did. When she tucked the cloth carefully around it, the glow patterns spread gently along its body in a warm, flowing wave. When she paused, the glow settled. When she smiled, the patterns shimmered. "You're full of surprises," she whispered. The creature responded with a tiny chirp. As if agreeing, she spent several minutes simply sitting near it, watching its movements, learning how it behaved. It wasn't afraid of her. In fact, it seemed to pay close attention to her expressions. If she looked concerned, its glow dimmed slightly. If she laughed softly, the glow brightened. She didn't understand this connection, but she didn't question it either. Not yet. She simply accepted it with the open heart of someone who had lived long enough to know that not everything needed a perfect explanation. After some time, she stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, leaving the world bright and quiet. The mountains in the distance shimmered under the sunlight, and the large pine trees cast long shadows across the ground. She opened the curtain a little more, letting the light fill the room. The creature tilted its head toward the window, watching the brightness with curiosity. Its wings, still folded tightly, shifted slightly, as if they were reacting to the sunlight. She turned back and said softly, "You want to get closer to the window?" It blinked slowly, and the golden glow around it pulsed once. She wasn't sure why, but something told her it understood. She carefully lifted the creature from the nest, keeping it wrapped in a soft cloth so it wouldn't get cold. It didn't resist. Instead, it curled comfortably against her chest, letting out a warm hum that she could feel through the fabric dot when she carried it to the window. She gently set it down on a thick blanket she spread across the windowsill. The creature settled onto it, warming the spot instantly. Its glow brightened as it looked at the sky and snow, as though it recognized something far away. She leaned beside it and whispered, "Beautiful, isn't it?" The creature made a soft sound, not its usual trill, but something more gentle, almost like a sigh. The glow on its scales shifted into a soft blue for a moment, then returned to gold. She had no idea what the colors meant. Maybe they were signs of emotion. Maybe they were natural reactions to light. She didn't know, but she found herself watching them with the same interest a grandmother might watch a grandchild, learning something new. After a few minutes, the creature's body relaxed, and it leaned slightly against her hand. She stroked its back gently, careful not to touch the injured wing. "Do you remember where you came from?" she asked quietly. Of course, it didn't answer, but its glow dimmed softly, as if something inside remembered the cold, the fear, the loneliness before she found it. She kept her hand on its back in comfort. "It's all right. You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." The creature closed its eyes, trusting her words. Later that afternoon, she decided to sit at the small desk in her room to write in the little travel journal she carried everywhere. She had planned to write about the resort, the scenery, and the peaceful environment. Instead, she found herself writing about the creature, how she found it, how it responded to her, how its glow changed with her emotions. She stopped after a few minutes and laughed quietly at herself. If anyone ever read what she wrote, they would think she had lost her mind. Who would believe a story like this? Certainly not the resort staff. Certainly not any tourist passing by. She didn't blame them. She could barely believe it herself. While she wrote, the creature moved from the windowsill and shuffled toward her slowly. She looked down and saw it blinking up at her. The way it walked was odd, graceful, yet unsteady, balancing its little body in a hesitant way. She lifted it carefully onto her lap. It curled up immediately, warming her legs like a small, living blanket. Its glow became a soft orange again, the color she now recognized as its calm, content state. She stroked its head gently. "You really like staying close, don't you?" It responded with a tiny hum. As the hours passed, she noticed something else, something that made her heart squeeze with quiet affection. The creature seemed to mimic her emotions almost naturally. When she felt peaceful, it glowed warmly. When she felt curious, the glow shifted slightly. When she felt protective, the creature moved closer to her, as if sensing the shift in her heartbeat. This small connection, this unspoken bond grew stronger with each passing hour. She didn't know that in the world beyond her knowledge, bonds like this meant something profound for creatures like it. She didn't know that she had become more than just a kind human who helped an injured being. She had become part of its sense of safety, part of its survival. All she knew was that she felt responsible for it. She felt needed, in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. That evening, she placed the creature back into its little nest and sat beside it until it fell asleep. Its glow dimmed to a gentle, steady pulse like a candle flame that refused to go out. She watched it for a long time, whispering quietly, "I don't know where you came from, little one, but I'm glad you found me." Outside, the sky turned darker as night settled over the mountains. But inside the small room, a soft golden glow stayed alive, warming the space and making her feel like something magical, something she couldn't explain, was beginning to unfold. She didn't know that far above Earth, something else was searching for the same glow. But that truth would come later. For now, she simply sat beside the tiny creature, unaware of how deeply it had begun to bond with her, and how much it would change everything that followed. The next morning started with a strange mix of hope and worry. The air inside the old house felt still, as if even the walls were waiting for something to happen. After everything that happened the day before, those long conversations, the truth finally opening up, and the way everyone slowly started to trust each other, it felt like we were standing on the edge of a new chapter. But nothing was clear yet. Nobody knew what direction the next steps would take us. He woke up earlier than everyone else, not because he wanted to, but because his mind wouldn't let him rest. His thoughts kept wandering back to the same questions again and again. Was he doing the right thing? Was he leading them into something dangerous? Was he strong enough to handle what was coming next? He moved quietly so he wouldn't wake anyone. The wooden floor creaked softly under his feet as he walked to the small kitchen. There wasn't much food in the cabinets, but he found enough to prepare something simple. When he stepped outside to get some fresh air, the cold hit his face. The sky was still pale, with the sun just beginning to rise. The soft light fell across the quiet road and the empty yard, and for a moment he felt a strange calm. Everything looked peaceful from the outside. No one could have guessed the kind of tension quietly building behind that front door. He sat on the steps, rubbing his hands together. A few minutes later, the others began to wake up. The first one to join him outside was the girl. She walked out slowly, rubbing her eyes like she hadn't slept well either. She didn't say anything, just sat beside him. Her presence alone was enough to break the heavy silence. After a minute, she finally spoke. "Do you think today will be easier?" He took a breath. "I hope so," he said. "But even if it isn't, we'll handle it one step at a time." She nodded, though her face showed she was unsure. He wanted to tell her everything would be okay, but he stopped himself. He didn't want to make promises he couldn't keep. Inside, her mother was already awake too. She was sitting at the table, deep in thought. She looked tired, but her eyes were steady. There was something different about her, that morning something stronger. Maybe it was because she had finally spoken the truth yesterday. Maybe it was because she no longer felt alone in this. Breakfast was quiet. The kind of quiet where everyone has 1,000 thoughts, but no one knows how to start. Finally, he put his cup down and said, "We need to talk about what happens next." Her mother looked at him carefully. "You think they'll come back?" He didn't want to scare anyone, but honesty felt safer than comforting lies. "Yes," he said, "and not just once. They'll keep trying until they get an answer." The girl shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "But we didn't do anything wrong. I know," he said gently. "But sometimes trouble finds you even when you didn't ask for it." Her mother leaned back, thinking. "We can't keep running forever," she said. He agreed. "We won't, but we need a plan." For a few minutes, no one spoke. They all just let the words settle. It wasn't just a plan they needed. It was strength, unity, a clear understanding of what they were fighting for. Then he explained the idea that had kept him awake half the night. They couldn't hide in the house forever, but they could choose where to take their stand. There was an old workshop on the edge of town abandoned for years, but still solid enough to use. It had thick walls, a basement, and only 2 real entry points. If they moved there before nightfall, they could protect themselves better. And more importantly, they could control the situation instead of waiting for it to crash into them again. At first, the girl looked nervous. Her mother looked unsure too. But slowly, they both realized he wasn't suggesting they fight. He was suggesting they prepare calmly, carefully, wisely. By afternoon, they packed whatever was necessary: food, water, blankets, the few personal items they couldn't leave behind. Every object placed into a bag carried a story, a memory, or a fear of losing something important. They didn't have much, but everything they had mattered. The road to the workshop wasn't far, but each step felt heavier than yesterday's walk. The girl kept looking around, as if expecting someone to appear from behind the trees. Her mother walked close beside her, alert but composed. He walked ahead, scanning the path, stopping now and then to listen to the wind and distant sounds. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were not entirely alone. When they finally reached the workshop, the sun was beginning to set. The building stood silently, half covered with vines, with dust on its windows and rust on its doors. But it wasn't weak. It still looked like it could hold its ground. He tested the doors, checked the windows, and made sure there were no gaps where anyone could slip in. The inside smelled old, but it was spacious enough for the 3 of them, and it felt safer than the open road. They set up a small space in the corner with blankets and bags. The girl sat down first, hugging her knees. Her mother sat next to her, brushing her hair gently, trying to comfort her without saying too much. He stood near the entrance, listening for any unusual sound. Time passed slowly. Every minute felt slightly longer than it should, but the silence was calming in its own way. It gave them space to breathe, think, and prepare for tomorrow, not later that night. As they settled in, the girl finally broke the silence again. "Do you think we'll ever go back to normal?" He looked at her and answered honestly, "Maybe not the same normal as before, but we'll find a new one, a better one, hopefully." Her mother watched him, studying the way he spoke, the way he carried himself despite the fear around them. There was something steady about him, something the house didn't have, something the empty roads didn't have either. Maybe that was why she trusted him more than she realized. As the hours passed, the workshop grew colder. They shared blankets, sitting close to stay warm. No one slept at the same time. They took turns resting while the others kept watch. Not because they expected something to happen immediately, but because they couldn't let their guard down completely. At one point, close to midnight, a sound echoed outside, a soft crunch of gravel under footsteps. He stood up instantly, signaling them to stay silent. The girl held her breath. Her mother wrapped an arm around her protectively. The footsteps came closer, then stopped. They waited. Then the sound faded away slowly, as if someone had paused to listen, then decided to move on. He didn't tell them who he thought it might be. He didn't want to increase their fear. But deep inside, he knew that what they were preparing for had already begun. When the girl finally fell asleep, her mother whispered to him, "Thank you for helping us, for staying." He shook his head. "I'm not doing this because I have to," he said softly. "I'm doing it because you're not alone in this. None of us are." She gave a small, tired smile. It wasn't a smile of joy, but a smile of relief, like someone who had been carrying a weight for too long and had finally found someone willing to help hold it. The night felt endless, but somehow they made it through. And when the first light of dawn entered the workshop through a dusty window, they realized something important. They hadn't broken. They hadn't run. They were still together, and this time they were ready for whatever came next. The morning inside the old workshop didn't feel like a normal morning. The sun was out, but the air was heavy with the feeling that something was close, something unseen, but slowly moving toward them. He woke up first again, stiff from sitting against the wall most of the night. The floor was cold, the blanket thin, and his neck hurt, but none of that mattered. His mind was too alert for him to feel anything else. He stood up quietly and checked the door. It was still locked the way he had left it. The windows were still secure. Nothing looked disturbed. Still, there was a strange quiet outside, as if even the wind had decided to stay away. He walked to the far corner where the girl and her mother were sleeping. They looked peaceful, but he knew it was the kind of peace built out of exhaustion, not comfort. He didn't want to wake them, so he stepped outside for a moment. The early morning light stretched over the empty road. The trees stood still, and the sky was the kind of pale blue that usually brings calm. But he couldn't relax. The footsteps he heard last night kept echoing in his head. He walked around the building slowly, checking everything again. The back wall had a few cracks, but nothing wide enough for someone to slip through. When he reached the far side, he stopped. The grass there was pressed down fresh footprints, light but real. His chest tightened. Someone had definitely been here. He crouched down and studied the ground. The prints weren't deep, which meant whoever made them wasn't running. They were walking slowly, carefully, and that worried him more. People running make mistakes. People moving slow know exactly what they're doing. He stayed outside for a few minutes, thinking. When he went back in, the girl was awake, rubbing her eyes. Her mother sat up a second later, looking at him with a question already in her eyes. He didn't want to panic them, but he couldn't hide the truth either. "We need to talk," he said. They listened quietly as he explained what he had found outside. The girl's face tightened with worry. Her mother took a slow breath, steadying herself like someone preparing for news she already expected. "So they know we're here," her mother said quietly. He nodded. "Maybe not for sure, but they've been close. They're looking." The room went still for a moment. They didn't cry. They didn't panic. They just sat in silence, trying to understand what this meant for them. Finally, the girl whispered, "What do we do now?" He thought for a moment before answering. "We don't run again. Not yet. If we keep running, we'll always be one step behind. We need to decide how we want this to end." Her mother looked at him closely. "You think we can end it?" "I think we can make the right people listen," he said. "But we need proof, evidence, something that shows the truth clearly." The girl frowned. "But we don't know where to find it." "Maybe not yet," he said. "But whoever was here last night, they weren't trying to attack. They were searching, which means they're trying to figure something out too." Her mother leaned forward. "So you think they're not sure about us either?" He nodded slowly. "Exactly. And that gives us a chance." They spent the next hour discussing everything calmly. No shouting, no fear taking over, just quiet, serious planning. The kind that comes from people who have been pushed too far and can't afford to make mistakes anymore. They needed to gather anything that could help them prove their innocence. Old documents, messages, recordings, anything they could remember or find. Her mother mentioned something she had kept hidden for years, something she never thought she would need again. A small device, tucked away in a metal box in the attic of the old house they had left behind. The girl turned pale. "We can't go back there." He hesitated, but he knew she was right to be scared. Going back meant taking a risk. But going forward without that device could be worse. He knelt in front of her. "We won't force anything. But think about this. If that device can help clear everything and give us a future without hiding, then maybe risking a little now can save us from a lot later." She swallowed hard, but she didn't argue. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll be careful," she said gently. "We won't let anything happen to you." By midday, they decided they would go back together. Not to stay, just to get what they needed and leave before nightfall. He checked the road again before they left. It looked empty, but he knew empty roads could be the most dangerous ones. They walked quickly, staying close, listening to every sound around them. The girl kept looking down the road, her hands shaking slightly. Her mother stayed beside her, ready to comfort her if needed. He walked ahead, scanning every corner, every tree, every shadow. When they reached the old house, it looked exactly the same. Quiet, still, but the air around it felt different, heavier. A place that used to feel like home now felt like a memory slowly fading. Her mother unlocked the door carefully. The house smelled dusty, untouched. They moved inside quietly and headed straight for the attic door. He climbed up first. The attic was dim, but nothing looked disturbed. He checked each corner to make sure no one had been there. Then her mother came up and pointed toward a wooden box under a stack of blankets. "That's it," she whispered. He pulled out the metal box. It was old, scratched, but still locked. Her mother opened it and lifted the device gently. It was small, shaped like a palm-sized stone, but marked with a symbol that meant everything to their past. The girl stared at it silently. So much trouble. Because of that? Her mother shook her head. Not the device. The truth inside it. Before they could say anything else, a sound came from downstairs. Soft, slow. The same sound he heard outside the workshop last night. That footsteps. He froze. Her mother pulled the girl close, holding her tightly. The footsteps moved across the floorboards and stopped right below the attic door. He signaled them to stay silent. His heart pounded hard, but his mind stayed clear. Whoever was down there wasn't rushing. They were waiting. Minutes felt like hours before the footsteps moved again toward the front door. Then the door opened slowly and closed. They waited. No other sounds followed. When he was sure the house was empty again, he whispered, "We need to leave, now." They climbed down carefully and made their way outside. The road was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel empty. Someone was close. Someone was watching. And now they knew for sure that whoever was searching for them wasn't planning to stop. They hurried back to the workshop, moving faster than before. Every step felt heavier, but they didn't stop until they reached the door and locked it behind them. The girl sank to the floor, breathing hard. Her mother held the device tightly, as if it was the only thing keeping them together. He stood by the door, listening, thinking, planning. They had the device now. They had the truth. But they also had a new problem. Someone had found them. Twice. And the next time, they wouldn't just walk away. The girl looked up at him with tired, frightened eyes. "What happens now?" He sat beside her and answered honestly. "Now," he said softly, "we get ready. Because everything is about to change."